Hi everyone, I'm Dawn Hughes. I'm the editor of SpudSmart, Canada's #1 source for potato news. And I am here again this month with the lovely Victoria Stamper, General Manager of the United Potato Growers of Canada. And it has only been a few weeks since we saw each other last.
That's right.
In Manitoba. But since then, I got to come home and you did not. You have
Yeah.
been running solid.
Yes, it's been busy. It's that time of year, I guess. So, Manitoba Potato Days, New Brunswick Conference, Potatoes New Brunswick, and then PEI Potato Board had their Potato Day last week. So, yeah, it's been a bit crazy. And then off to Vancouver next week.
And that's for
the BC Potato and Vegetable meeting. AGM.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when we were in Manitoba together, we talked kind of briefly about how there was a sort of underlying sense of pride, resilience. How were you feeling after attending some of the other grower meetings since then?
Oh, absolutely. In terms of the industry as a whole, that's definitely the feeling. When you can put aside the tariff talk, unfortunately, that's what's overriding everything right now, the uncertainty around tariffs. But when you put that aside, the industry continues to plow forward with improvements, varietal research, actually tons of research projects in all different parts, soil management, crop rotation, cover crops, all the kinds of things that we heard about when we were in Manitoba. The industry just keeps moving forward with those improvements and improvements in production. So, no, it's very positive. It's just really that uncertainty overriding everything with the potential threat of tariffs that's kind of changing things at the moment.
Well, and I think it's impossible to predict things in this
Yeah.
moment right now. So
Yeah.
there's not even any advice. I think your advice at the beginning of, or at the tail end of 24, sort of that keep calm and carry forward because we don't know anything, is still valid advice.
Yes, absolutely. Sticking together, I think, as an industry is the most important part, and try, so that the growers don't have to try and solve it all on their own, that we're working well together and helping each other province to province across the country. So
You mentioned that a lot of research projects that you've been seeing presented about, and I've been seeing that as well. There's some really cool stuff on the horizon. Anything that kind of surprised you, or you were like, "Ooh, can't wait to see where that comes," or any highlights from some of that?
yeah, that's a good, that now I've got three in my head, so I'm sort of like, which one did I see where? Yeah, I think it's more the fact of the sharing of best practices. So yes, when I see something of interest, then there was actually a speech on irrigation management. And I said, oh, somebody in BC had asked me about irrigation management. So I'll pass those contacts on
Yeah.
to other people. So, in my specific role, it's really about market supply and demand and that sort of data. So I don't always get the opportunity, but as a personal, I find it very interesting to learn about potatoes. When you're talking about the potato pile, it's very important to understand what's impacting the potato pile. So I was really interested in Julie Patchy's discussion and Becca's on storage and disease, potential diseases in storage and post
Yep.
harvest and that type of thing. Because how is that impacting the crop and how it moves
Right.
throughout the storage season? So, I find it really interesting to learn about that part of the crop growth and storage. So
Yeah. We started these conversations to talk about the market and what's
yeah,
going on in the market. And we didn't have a market update last month because it was that time of year, but
yeah.
now we do. So can you tell us what's going on in terms of, you had the recent holdings report come out?
Yes, I do, and I have it with me just to make sure I've got the right facts and figures for you. But yes, in general, holdings for Canada overall, all sectors are actually down just over a percentage when compared to February of 2024. And a lot of that is coming out of Manitoba and Alberta, the decreases. Actually in the east, PEI, New Brunswick, and Quebec are showing increases in holdings compared to last year. Not necessarily surprising due to the production levels that were better in the east this year because the weather was so much better than last year. So no real big surprises. We are, higher than the 5-year average for this time of year.
Yeah.
but the pace hasn't been too bad. January disappearance was a bit slower in certain sectors. In the fresh sector, I suppose we would look there. Um, some were concerned it was about exports to the U.S. and or that they would change due to the looming potential tariffs, and actually they stayed fairly on pace. And if we look at our exports to the U.S. from August to December, because there is a bit of a lag on the data collection there, August to December, we're actually ahead of pace compared to last year. So, things are still moving well. There's not an over surge of exports in January because we wanted to get it before the tariff. Just regular business, and things our low dollar obviously helps, prop up
Right.
those exports. It supports the exports, but, things are moving well. Some have reported that post-holiday slump in January, not unusual. I shouldn't use the word slump, that gets the growers concerned, but it's not a slump, it's just a slowdown. So packers are still packing and things are still moving and the pile is moving well. We're actually in fresh sector very well, I would say, equalized between supply and demand at this point. So I think things are looking well, but we are keep moving along, and we'll see what happens in this month. And usually the promotions start to pick up after Valentine's Day, and things start to move again. But
Yeah.
weather impacts that. We've had some snowstorms, everybody, in the last week or so. So that obviously impacts loads that are trying to move out.
Yeah.
So that might have an impact for this week. But no, in general, I think things are moving fairly well. Processing sector, we saw a big disappearance was actually up in all provinces this month, which is I rarely see that all showing the same increased movement. Some have speculated that the processors were running hard in lieu of the potential tariffs and trying to get product out.
Yeah.
But that's not confirmed. That's really speculation. But definitely saw some movement there, and seed is starting to move a little bit, but nothing out of the ordinary for this time of year. It's really February and March that we'll start to really look at seed and how things are moving along. So the uncertainty might have an impact on planting intentions, though. People are a little, what do I do? Is the export market going to be there, etc. So that certainly impacts their decisions around planting intentions. So we'll see February. It'll be interesting to see the seed movement in February if it's
That,
on track.
that's actually the area that I thought that there would be a little bit more hesitation just because that uncertainty,
Yeah.
like you said, seeding intentions. And then also, I don't know, maybe it's just because it's in my face right now, but the weather right now
Yeah.
just feels so like, is spring ever coming? Obviously, that's different for provinces like BC, but
Yeah.
in Alberta and a lot of the East
Well,
Coast.
that's it. I mean, there is a lot of seed that does move down into the US. So for the southern areas that have started planting, there'll be seed moving, but it's typically not a huge movement in January. So there's sort of nothing really out of the ordinary yet. We'll see sort of February, March where that goes. But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely should be seeing some movement soon.
I like that kind of encapsulation that you had there. It's kind of business as usual, business.
I think so. I mean, things can change, as we know, and very quickly. So, but so far so good in terms of, I only have up to January movement, so up until February holdings. So, but no, things seem to be well on track.
Aside from the obvious weather and potential tariff, anything you see kind of any obstacles, potential challenges ahead or
No, I think unfortunately it's really tied around that. Our next growers are really right now making those decisions around planting intentions, probably even prior, at least in terms of planning. You've got to get the
yeah,
seed booked, and got this, then it shipped in, and then prepared, and then ready for planting. And you know, some provinces like BC can be as early as March planting. So
right.
they're starting to make decisions fairly soon, but I think that's really the big place people are at now going, what do we do in terms of our intentions for planted acreage? So we're waiting to see. Plus, it's contract negotiations right now for the big processors on the fry side and the potato chip side. So A lot of provinces are busy in negotiations right now, so that's happening. And until people have those the processing contracts, how what are the intentions there in terms of what's going to happen with volume for
Yeah.
those processing contracts as well. So lots of question marks at the moment, but not. I mean, the tariffs adds certainly an extra dimension to it. Most people would be going through this questioning period right now for planting intentions with respect to processing, waiting for contracts and things like that. So
Right.
I think it's the fresh sector maybe that's more impacted in terms of the uncertainty, not necessarily more impacted, but differently
Yeah.
in terms of the uncertainty of planting intentions. So.
When we talked about this before, one of your great messages was sort of about like you can't control what you can't control.
Mm.
Any advice going to growers who are perhaps even more a little bit tense? I mean, I know it kind of ebbs and flows, that tension,
Yes.
and things are wildly unpredictable right now. Any advice as growers look to those planting intentions?
I wish I had more to give. I mean, we're trying to keep people updated on the market in the US, what's happening. That crop is moving very well. Colorado, Idaho shipping, heavily, even Wisconsin. So everybody, the shipments, the fresh pile of potatoes in the US is moving very, very well. There are, questions about, well, what if the Mexican market sort of shuts down for those fresh exports from the US? What does that do in terms of backing up the supply and therefore back up the supply chain into
Yeah.
Canada? So having no room for Canadian potatoes. And, 2/3 of what goes into Mexico actually comes out of Colorado, so, or close to it. So, and their crop is moving very, very well. So even if it does back up, we're not talking an immense surplus. There would still be potatoes needed down the eastern seaboard.
Right.
They're not going to be, Colorado isn't necessarily suddenly going to start shipping up the eastern seaboard necessarily. So anyway, we'll see. There's lots of unknowns there.
Yeah.
And so we're just trying to make sure that the growers have the right information around that, supply and demand and what's happening. The potato pile, so far so good, is moving well. All reports are that the packers and growers on the eastern seaboard, or the packers, I should say, are still interested in our potatoes. They need them. They don't grow enough for their own markets, so they definitely need to bring in our potatoes. So yeah, we'll see, sort of taking it one day at a time at this point. I would love to be able to give them a little more certainty around, planting intentions and that sort of thing, but it's kind of tough at this point to
Of
do
course.
that, other than give them the most information possible. And, Canadian Potato Council with Fruit and Vegetable Growers of Canada, Canadian Federation of Agriculture, CPMA, everyone is advocating on the growers' behalf to
Right.
ensure that potatoes are front and center. There's an understanding of the interdependence between the two countries. Even National Potato Council in the U.S. is on the same page. They are not interested in having tariffs, so that's a good thing. And yeah, we're all trying to work together as an industry to make sure everyone understands that we are very interdependent, and we have good trade relations at this point that we don't want to impact, for
Yeah.
long term. So.
Sometimes it's hard to think past the fact of it's a great product and it's a staple and it's so necessary, but I understand that that kind of rational thinking doesn't always come into play. So,
No, and by the same token, I think it's a chance for us to look inward. Like any business, when you have one big customer, is to make sure that, is there a contingency plan? Are there plans for diversification? So, the
yeah,
government is working with the industry associations to look at alternative export markets, what's available, and investigating that with the provinces. So, there's a lot going on in terms of that type of contingency planning, which I think is the most important. Is one, those discussions are very productive and they're good long term, whether there's tariffs or no tariffs. Having those discussions around the availability of other export markets, inter-provincial trade policies, all that
right.
kind of stuff is super important. And really bringing the industry together, making sure that we're standing together, working together, so that the growers don't feel, well, I've got to work this out all on my own.
Right.
that we are really standing together. And I think that's the most important message. And like you said earlier, focus on what we can control.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what's happening south of the border is really not under our control. And focus on what we can here at home, and really prepare ourselves well.
Sounds like fantastic advice yet again. So thank
Easy to say sitting in my position. I'm sure the growers are going, yeah, but you don't have a crop out there to plant, which is
you.
very, 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 very true. I don't sit in any position to say, hey, you should be doing this or doing that. It's really just, what information do you need that I can help you with to
Yeah.
help you make your decisions?
Well, we're certainly grateful for you. Thank you.
Ah,
I appreciate again your time and your candor,
no
and I look
problem.
forward to talking to you next month again.
Sounds good. Yeah, next month. That will be March already. Hard to believe.